Hello, and welcome to another episode of the First Time Founders podcast, the show where we talk about how to start a business from nothing and grow it into something meaningful. I'm Rob Lydiard. I'm a professional implementer of the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS, which means I work with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial leadership teams to help them get what they want from their business. Typically, aligning around a vision and figuring out how to get there, learning how to execute with more discipline and accountability so we hit our numbers, and improving team health because we can be a bit chaotic in startup land, and most small businesses are surviving with either too much or too little tension at leadership team level. It's very hard to have fun and get things done when you're in a secretly unhealthy team. So that's my day job. But in my spare time, I love meeting with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial people to talk about the first time founder journey. And those of us that have got a few scars on our back and have had relevant experiences, pay it forward by sharing some of the things we've learned so that those coming down the entrepreneurial track can hopefully make their own mistakes rather than just repeating ours. Today, I'm talking to Alfie Lambert, who's a long-time entrepreneur. He's founded various businesses, but most recently is the founder of a business called BizCrunch. What we're talking about today is entrepreneurship by acquisition, because BizCrunch provides data to potential acquirers of small businesses across the UK, companies who are not listed and where it's otherwise extremely difficult to understand the financial profile and the contact information of the potential sellers of those businesses. Alfie's a growth hacker, business entrepreneur by background, typically partnering with engineers. So we also talk a little bit about some of the marketing and growth strategies that aspiring acquirers might consider applying to some of the more traditional businesses that are typically available for acquisition from retiring entrepreneurs, people that are reaching 60s, 70s, and are ready to realize some value from their life's work and maybe don't have children or a natural successor in the business to take over. So we're just waiting for someone like you to send them an email using BizCrunch data, suggesting that you might be a good custodian of their business for its next 10, 20 years. So if that sounds interesting, I give you, with no further ado, Alfie Lambert. Enjoy. Alfie, welcome to the First Time Founders podcast. Thank you for doing this, sir.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm really looking forward to it.
The privilege is all mine. Alfie, before we're going to talk about entrepreneurship by acquisition today and product-led growth, and I'm sure wherever else the conversation takes us. But can we get started by you just giving people a sense of where you come from, the journey that you've been on through your various entrepreneurial rides before we dive into the substance of the topics?
Sure, absolutely. I've got a bit of a strange path into sort of entrepreneurship. So my first job leaving school was telemarketing. I was one of those awful salespeople that calls you up at home and bothers you. I left school, I didn't have many qualifications. I like chatting to people, so that's kind of where I went down that road. And then one day in my 20s, I decided it was time to sort of go back and study. It was a credit crunch and, there wasn't much out there. I wanted to be a journalist. So I studied politics, quickly discovered I didn't like journalism, and got picked up by a few people for my writing to do some marketing stuff and sort of fell into it from there. Worked with the first ever Bitcoin ATM company in the UK, which flopped because no one wanted Bitcoin back then, which was a shame. And I could have been paid in Bitcoin and I chose not to, and I regret that every day.
Oh, wow.
I worked for a music festival. My first job out of uni was for an AI and data science company, and I was a growth hacker. So I kind of went from the content into the data stuff. And that's where I met Ardal, who's my first ever co-founder. We kind of built a business together and sort of fell into it that way. So it was never originally the plan for me. I just kept finding things that I was excited about and moving into those.
That's amazing. And how would you describe what's your sort of contribution to the founder groups that you typically go into? Like when you co-found a business, what usually would be your unique ability that you'll bring to the party?
I think that's evolved over time. So originally it was always marketing purely. So it was, a bit of contents and data stuff, PPC. I can be a bit of an all-rounder when it came to marketing. But then over time, as I'm sure you know in startups, sometimes you have to just step in and perform a role. So, when I was working at Lix, I had to learn to become a product manager, which is sort of tough to do on the ground. But it was me and Ardal, who's one developer, and he needed product managing. So that's something else I picked up along the way, and then had to dip back into doing some sales stuff. And, because we were purely bootstrapped, there wasn't room for many people to come on and help. So you have to kind of pick up roles. And so it's evolved over time. And now, I'll pitch, I will sell, I will do pretty much everything apart from development now, which I have tried learning before, but that's just not the way my brain works.
Yeah, completely. And the engineers often do need someone to do everything else, don't they? Do you want to just give,
Yeah,
you've alluded to a couple of companies there. Can you give people
sure.
a sense of what you're working on right now, the names of those companies and what they do?
Absolutely. So I'm working for two companies at the moment. I'm co-founding BizCrunch, which is a platform to help people in the M&A industry find data on businesses they want to buy, particularly off-market stuff in the UK, which is a bit of a mess, and we can cover that a bit later. But I still also spend a couple of days a week with Lix, which was the first startup I ever founded, and they help people find business data again, but slightly different. It's not for M&A, it's for pretty much any business. We will help with market intelligence or email finding. It's a bunch of different stuff. So both in that business data sort of forum, but it's just slightly different audiences.
Love it. And this is what brings us into talking about entrepreneurship by acquisition, doesn't it? I haven't actually talked about it that much on this podcast, but for those listening, I was a day one co-founder of a SaaS business, Yapster. I am only 41. I'm not ready to hang up my it's not boots, is it? That like we're like software cowboys, right? But I'm not
Yeah,
I'm not ready to close my laptop.
there you go.
But I'm not. I don't think I want to start something from zero again. I love the
Yeah.
idea of acquiring and Alfie, you've founded businesses, but now with BizCrunch, you're obviously providing data and insights to acquirers, right? Have you ever thought about acquiring a business?
I hadn't until I spoke to the BizCrunch team. I think the thing is, and I think this is where we need to work on entrepreneurship through acquisition, is I don't think people know how accessible it is and how possible it can be. I think if you have the right business skills and some understanding of an industry, I think it's a great option for a lot of people. But I think people don't understand the access to the data and the finances there, and there is a whole system for people to go out and complete an acquisition. But for a lot of people, I think they imagine M&A as something that big banks and huge companies do. But it's something that we really need to promote. We have an aging population in the UK. Our data shows that over a third of companies are owned by people at or past retirement age, which is a bit of a ticking time bomb, right? That's a lot of money in the economy. That's a lot of jobs. A lot of people are employed in those companies. What happens when those people retire? Not enough companies are being bought. The numbers last year, maybe about 2,000 companies changed hands in the UK, SMEs. It's really not enough when there are tens of thousands of companies that are going to have to close in the next sort of 10 years. So I hadn't thought about it before, but I do think about it all the time now. And I think it's a really good option for a lot of people. I think they could sidestep some of the stress of being a startup founder as well. I think, buying an established business that has customers and a brand and stuff, I think that's such a great thing to do.
100%. So we'll spend a bit of time talking about that and what a good or a bad small founder-led business to buy might look like. But can you just help people really understand how your business kind of helps with entrepreneurship through acquisition? Like what sort of data, what sort of things would people get from your platform and insights that would assist an aspiring acquirer?
Okay, excellent. So the majority of companies that are bought in the UK aren't necessarily listed for sale. So you can list your company for sale with a broker, and there are some issues with that system. But a lot of the time, it's what we call off-market originations, deal origination. So it's basically cold contacting businesses that fit your profile. The problem with that is finding that data. Up until now has been a bit of a struggle. This was actually the position my co-founder Adam found himself in. So he exited his startup. He wanted to get into brick and mortar companies, and found this kind of data discovery process was a bit of a mess. He's an excellent product guy, so he started thinking, how can we make this better? So at the moment, you would go to Companies House, which is a great store of data. But companies that turn over less than 10 million, their revenue isn't reported. You can figure it out from the data there, but it's going to take a long time for tens of thousands of companies. You have to find the business owner's contact details, rummage through financial reports. There's a lot that goes into it. And also, I'm sure you've run cold campaigns before. What percentage of those companies are even going to reply to you, right? So you could spend
For sure.
3 hours per company gathering this data, but that's a bit soul destroying when you realize that only 1% of those are ever going to get back to you, right? So, and that's kind of the process people have been using, or they've been, repurposing credit referencing software and other bits and pieces. So what we do is we just provide that data for you up front. So we have every company on Companies House. We've worked with a data partner to run some algorithms on their profit and loss sheets so we can estimate their revenue. We give you the direct owner email address. We give you everything you need so that you can go onto BizCrunch and go, hey, I want to buy manufacturing companies in London which turn over less than £10 million and are profitable. And you hit all those buttons and bang, we provide you with the list, the ways to contact those people, everything you need to then go and start that conversation. We're basically doing all the boring bits for you, so you can go out there and actually talk to people and get that started.
Yeah, it's an amazing proposition, because for those that are interested in entrepreneurship, have never considered acquisition entrepreneurship, maybe we'll just give them a quick high level primer. It's not wildly different to buying a house, is it? In that
No.
you have to put down a deposit, so you're looking for a deal, and the bank, the lender, is only going to lend you a percentage of the value of the asset, like when you try and buy a house. Because if you fail to pay your mortgage repayments and they need to take your house and sell it to get their loan back, they want to have some headroom so that the loan is less than the value of the house if they sell it in distress. Similarly, when you go buy a business, there are banks that will lend against the expected cash flows of the business, but they'll only lend you up to a given percentage of the assumed value of the business, so that if you let the bank down and they need to step in and recover the asset, sell it to get their money back, the person that's wiped out is you, because you effectively lose your deposit. And so there's slightly more to it than that, but basically you need some stake capital, which you put in on your own, or you get investors to back you, and then you find a profitable business that from its profits can pay the interest on a loan, and then you sometimes give a personal guarantee, but you generally then raise the loan against that business, and suddenly after a legal exercise you're the new owner of that shiny new business. And so Alfie's absolutely right. Often the hardest thing is finding the business in the first place, and in a state where they want to sell, maybe a retiring owner whose children that don't want to run the business, or that doesn't have children, or a natural successor, and then persuading them to trust you with the keys. The actual transaction then of raising the finance and doing the deal is somewhat formulaic. Is that fair, Alfie?
Yeah, and there are some other ways to raise that finance. So, there's borrowing against the assets of the company, as you would do with a house. I suppose there's something there to be reclaimed, so a leverage buyout. You can also do some amount of seller financing. So, if a company is making a certain amount of profit every year, you can say to the business owner, look, I'll pay you for 50% of the company now, and the further 50%, 10% a year for 5 years out of the cash flow. While you go and start your retirement and sip sangria on a beach somewhere, and I'll take over the running of the company. So there are a bunch of different ways of doing it. And again, I think these are other things that we should be trying to help, teach people, so that it does seem more accessible. There isn't just one way to it. You don't need to have, 10 million in the bank to buy a £10 million company. Like I said, it's much like buying a house. These are all the sorts of things that I really think that we should be teaching people to go out there and buy businesses.
And listen, I know you're too classy to do sort of too much shameless plugging of BizCrunch, but it is actually relevant. I think it'll be important for anyone listening to this to get value. If someone wanted, they are going to need to get access to data to reach out to potential sellers. Roughly, what does it kind of cost for the average sort of individual founder searcher to be able to get access to BizCrunch, to be able to run a campaign to find a potential seller?
Well, so we've tried to be very flexible with this. We have a credit-based system, so it actually depends on how much data that you want and how much work you want to put in. So if you want to come on there and search up all the premium companies and us provide all of the data and all of the email addresses, you can spend a few more credits, and it could be a few £100s a month for a couple of hundred companies. But you can just go to the very simple end and just take the basic records and letters. Some people prefer to send letters; they don't want emails anyway. And you can sign up for as low as sort of £50 a month, anywhere up to sort of £500 a month or beyond if you're an enterprise member. So it really is flexible. But we do offer a free tier, which gives you sort of 25 credits. So that could be 25 basic company records, or maybe one premium company with some emails. So if anyone is listening and is interested, I would definitely sign up and play around with that. And you can get a feel for what you get for your money. There's so many different types of business buyers. I've tried to be as flexible as possible with the pricing, because again, it's not just M&A houses and big companies that are buying other companies. Sometimes it is just an individual like me and you, and maybe they just want to spend a little bit to get started and get their feet wet, and then spend a little bit more as they get a bit more serious. So we try to sort of work with the customers there.
Love it. Okay, folks. So you've got it. So hopefully we've whet your appetite for exploring acquisition entrepreneurship as an option for your next thing. You now know where to get the data to start looking for potential companies that you might be able to acquire. So Alfie, now let's jump forward in time and assume our listeners have acquired a business. Let's say they've acquired it from a retiree that's run a profitable business, but maybe not the most digitally savvy. Can we sort of switch over to your growth hacking experience now and maybe have some fun talking about some of the things that founders might want to, or acquisition entrepreneurs might want to consider in terms of building growth in a business that they've just acquired, where they're not necessarily going to be able to go and just get 2-3 million of venture capital, right? Because they've got a real business that's got a modest growth rate, which is why they were able to buy it to begin with. They're not going to be able to claim it's the next Facebook, right? So they're probably going to have to grow out of internally generated cash flows. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, I mean, that's where, if I was to acquire a company, that's absolutely where I'd apply my skills, because that's my background. I think that you're right. If you're buying from a retiring owner, then there probably is something digitally that you could do. Maybe people, I think in established businesses, could lend some ideas from the tech world. Maybe look into subscriptions for customers, for example, and have that recurring revenue happening. Look at working at tiers. There's a whole bunch of stuff that people could do. There are still a lot of companies, about 20% of UK companies still don't have websites even. So you can go as far back as that. It depends on really where the state of the business is.
That's amazing. Where have you had your most success, would you say? Like, if you think about like growth initiatives, techniques that you've discovered, like what are the ones that immediately spring to mind as your kind of go-tos? I know they won't be effective in all environments, but what are some of your favorite means of generating attention and growth?
I'll give you two types, because people always want an exciting one. The main one is really quite boring. And one of the biggest things that's generated revenue for me consistently is just good content and SEO. And I know that everybody says that, and I know that it's not the most exciting thing to do, but if you do put the groundwork in, then it's just kind of evergreen. I still get customers signing up links at my previous startup from articles that I wrote sort of 5 years ago. They're still generating lots of traffic. That's still bringing me revenue in. So I think that is really important. And I think that can still work for an established business. It's a bit more of a long-term strategy. But everybody uses Google. Even your gran is using Google to search things up these days. So I think that's something that people could use. About things that come to mind, I mean, in my growth hacking times, I've done some quite fun and exciting ideas. When I was doing promotion for the music festival, I had a bunch of people sign up for Bumble and Bumble and other sort of dating site accounts that were really, really beautiful avatars. And when people match with them, they said, "Hey, come to this festival and I'll come on a date with you. Here's the ticket link." So that was a bit cheeky. They actually put that in the student newspaper, and they did a bit of an expose on me for being a cheeky marketer. So there you go. That's a fun one, but I wouldn't advise that. That wouldn't work for many businesses.
That's amazing. So actually, you would always start with making sure you've got a good web presence with relevant content, and I guess that applies to whatever type of business you start or acquire. I mean, if I've never done SEO before, and you're right, everyone does say it, and you read online, but in my experience, quite a lot of founders struggle to get the cut through that you've clearly enjoyed. Like, what are some of the principles that one needs to consider? Is it a length of time they need to commit to it? Is it being really sharp in the keywords? Is it all of the above? Like, why does SEO fail when founders try it? Like what are the main failure modes?
I think that people forget, and this is not just in SEO, this is in all types of content, in their website copy and everything. People forget that they're talking to another person, and they don't put themselves in the seat of the person reading that content. How often do you go onto a website and you read it and you go, "I have no idea what it is that you do"? Or you read a piece of content and it's written in a kind of stifling, sort of terse way where, they're trying to get a point across or stuff a bunch of keywords in. I think people forget to be conversational. People want to read content that is useful and easy to read. And I think that's easy enough to do. Maybe put yourself in the shoes of how you would talk to a customer. In terms of, where to start with content, think about, if you are that customer, what would you be searching for? You can use a bunch of the Ahrefs or some of those other things to see what the main keywords are. I think Google does a free keyword search, and just type those questions in, see how many people are searching for those, see what the responses are like. I think often you can look at sort of question and answer responses on a lot of company pages, and they're quite robotic. I think people forget, even in B2B, there's no really such thing as B2B. It's B2C. It's always a person at the other end. So always try and, my content, I always try and keep a bit of conversational, a bit of humor in there. So it's not just, paragraph after paragraph of "we do this and we're great at it." Try and have a bit of dialogue in there if possible. So yeah, I think that's quite important. And I think also nowadays, I think people should be careful of leaning too much on like ChatGPT.
That's interesting.
Google's algorithm is extremely intelligent, and it doesn't fall for keyword stuffing anymore. So you can't just put loads of keywords in, and it will know if you're just using ChatGPT content. It uses a kind of the same thing schools use to see if you're cheating. It's the same sort of software. So if you are going to use it as a kind of blank page syndrome fixer. So get a first draft out of it and then edit it. That's probably the best advice at the moment.
That's interesting. So you alluded to some pages that you wrote 5 years ago that are still generating revenue for you. I appreciate it might be niche content, but would you mind just giving me a feel for what's on those, like your sort of best performing page, just to help people bring that to life, so if they understand a bit around what Leaks does, and then just roughly high level what the best performing content is sort of within that business?
Yeah, so those best performing content pieces are the ones that get me the most traffic are ones that are most helpful to users. So they're not necessarily ones that convert best for me, but teaching people, because we are a LinkedIn data exporter, it's teaching people how to use LinkedIn. And some of those people will funnel through into signing up for the product. The ones that convert the best are the question and answer ones, where people have typed in, how do I get X data from LinkedIn? And I answer that question for them, and I take them on a walkthrough, and I share them screenshots, and I create a video, and I just really provide helpful, useful content for them. And I say, look, at the end of it, if you want to use Licks, it would help you do this a bit faster, but I'll always try and give them a free method as well. So it's just trying to be most helpful. Those are the pages that work the best.
Do you know what's interesting? As you've been speaking about these two themes, I moved into a new house. I moved from Shoreditch in London out to Brentwood on the east end of the Elizabeth line in Essex.
Okay.
And I moved September 22. September 22. And I'm not very handy. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on the house we wanted to do. We got a shed assembled because of, the crap we're accumulating as relatively new parents. The roof needed something done. Anyway, in all cases, I'm going through, and you're right, I'm always Googling initially how to try and do something myself, and then the best sort of suppliers of products and or services to assemble a shed, for example. And it was unbelievable how often you couldn't find a good local vendor for the product or service you were looking for, even when you were searching with really high buying intent. And then what was interesting is you would find a vendor, usually by just going to Google Maps, searching the relevant key search term and trying to find two or three vendors within, say, 15, 20 miles of where you live. Yeah. And then you'd call them, and quite often either no one would pick up, you'd leave a voicemail and no one would get back to you. You click through to their terrible website if they had one and send an email to info@localtradesperson.com and nobody would reply. So I can completely see how what you're saying makes sense, that I go buy a local roofing company, then create a website and actually be helpful answering questions related to domestic leaks and how that would all tie together. It's funny, isn't it? Because that would get you no points in San Francisco. We've said nothing that is like bleeding edge business insight. And yet, for most people, that possibly is the most achievable way to create life-changing personal wealth.
Totally. And, to go back to your point, that if you can't find it in the search because they haven't got the SEO, and then you put it into Google Maps, you said you'd find 2 or 3. The reality is there's probably 5 or 6, but they haven't even put themselves on Google Maps in the first place. That's something that I see all the time, and there's so many quick wins out there for for business buyers and for current business owners. Part of what we want to do at BizCrunch is to help people who want to sell their businesses with some of this stuff. Get themselves seller ready, and there's a lot of quick wins out there that people aren't doing. But yeah, it's not San Francisco friendly, but it's a great way to make money, right? Like I said, I've just had to have my roof done, and it was a nightmare trying to find a good company. And the guys that came were great, but they just got no profile anywhere. It had to come from a recommendation of someone else. And if they just did those small things, they'd probably have twice as much business. So yeah, there's a lot of quick wins out there.
That's fascinating. So talk to me about the vision for the sort of seller side of the marketplace for BizCrunch. Is that already completed, or is that where you're thinking about the next driver of growth? What would be the sort of service platform offer for sellers?
So we've just got started on that. We're working on phase 1 and starting to talk to sellers. This is something that came out. This wasn't the original idea.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't part of the original idea. But then the more we spoke to people that sold their businesses, the more we understood that they'd had a bit of a nightmare in that process. I think similarly, as you said, to selling a house, I think that sometimes brokers can be the estate agents of that process, and they don't always provide a great service. Look, I think part of the reason so few businesses sell. So there were 50,000 companies potentially for sale in the UK last year, and only 2,000 changed hands. That
Wow.
represents a real market failure.
Totally.
And from talking to people on both sides, it's generally that the businesses aren't quite ready to sell and that they're overvalued. And I think that a lot of this comes from the kind of brokerage model that they make their money by having you listed on their site. Actually, there was a study that was done into one of the larger brokerages. Someone did a kind of deep dive on their accounts, and I think only 10% of their funds come from companies actually selling. So 90% of their money just comes from having you listed. So when they come to you and you say, I think my business is worth £5 million, of course it is, Mr. Business Seller. You pay me a couple of £1,000s a month to be on my site, and they don't really mind if it sells. And I think that's part of the problem. Then the buyer has to try and negotiate them down. But, it tends to be 75% or less than the listed sale price, which is a huge drop if you're selling a multi-million-pound company. So I think that's part of the problem. And I think if we had a better system for, training business sellers, teaching them on the process, telling them what they need to know, not obfuscating it, not keeping them away from the information, but helping them get ready and providing them with a real accurate estimate, and then helping them speak to good buyers. I think we could sell so many more companies in the UK.
That is extraordinarily cool. And are you open to a kind of partner ecosystem for something like that? Like the good gals and guys on the advisory community, or are you thinking that really this needs to be more of a sort of Zestimate platform driven thing? Or are you still open minded, right? Because you're still in that entrepreneurial phase of building out the full vision.
I think we're probably going to go platform driven. I think we will keep it within BizCrunch. I mean, look, I would never say never. If someone comes along and they've got the right story and they want to work in the right ways, then absolutely. But yeah, that's where I think it needs to go. I think it does need a fresh approach. And there is going to be some pushback from business owners because, if I'm telling them their company's worth X and brokerage tells them it's worth Y, which is a lot more.
Yeah,
they are, most of them are. But I think there are enough business owners out there who are savvy enough to say, look, there must be a reason for this. Why is there this big discrepancy? And if they give us the time to explain, we're pricing it to sell, this is how it should actually work. I think we can win them over. And I think as we start to sell more companies and we have a lot more happy sellers, I think that will kind of spread and we'll move in the right direction.
that is unbelievably cool, though. Like if I could come on to BizCrunch and see the equivalent of a Zestimate, which is a rough value range based on sector, prevailing multiples of whatever they tend to change for. I mean, I guess if you can infer cash flow, maybe EBITDA, revenue's obviously pretty crude, but like it would be really interesting to be able to look up local businesses and then see an illustrative value range, even if it's algorithmically generated. Because that does make a difference, doesn't it? When people are thinking about what their property's worth, when they go on Zoopla or Zillow in the States and they look at this estimate price.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably work slightly differently. So that version of it we can offer with the product that we have now. So our estimated revenues and the algorithms that we use with the cash flow that they have, we can kind of give you an idea of that now. When we get to the seller, the selling platform, business owners would have listed their information themselves. So it will be kind of like a shop front, but they would have gone through a whole process with us to make sure that, we can verify their data and their values, and we'll work on estimates together. So it will be much more like going on there and buying a house. And yeah, I think business owners are going to jump at that once they realize that it is a kind of healthier model for selling their companies.
That's unbelievable. So what type of people are you interested in meeting at the moment, Alfie? I don't mean just like general entrepreneurs. You've been very good with me. I know you're active on LinkedIn and open to people reaching out to you if they just want to chat or need a bit of advice or something. But in terms of actually driving your own business, are there particular types of folks out there that are particularly useful to the mission at the moment?
Yeah, there are some really interesting people in the UK who are talking to first-time acquirers or kind of new acquirers. So there are a lot of great courses and influencers and podcasts and people out there who are kind of doing that entrepreneurship through acquisition journey. They're talking people through it. They're helping people make their first acquisition, and they've got access to the kind of people who would need to use BizCrunch and could get some real value from it. So those are the kind of people that I want to talk to, and I'm out there, actively trying to court at the moment, because there is a movement for this in the UK. It is starting to bubble under. It's already happened in the UK, in the US. Sorry, there are some really big influences there, and the US has some great support from the Small Business Administration, and there's a real kind of energy for that in the US, and it is starting to happen in the UK. So I think anybody who's working towards that goal here is someone that I would love to talk to and talk to their community, and hopefully, sort of help both on their acquisition journeys.
Amazing. Listen, mate, this is so exciting. I'll put the link to BizCrunch in the notes. Link to your contact information, and it just sounds like it's just an open invitation to folks in the entrepreneurship acquisition ecosystem to come have a
Yeah.
chat. I mean, you're certainly not going to get rid of me now, because, as I say, I think this is probably the most exciting entrepreneurial opportunity for the next 10 to 20 years. So I would definitely encourage those watching and listening to reach out to you. It's been really good to have you, and thanks for sharing the insights.
You're very welcome. It's been great talking to you.